Japan Up Close.
Okay, thank you. I'm very glad to be here. It's been a while since I went to Japan. I arrived to Japan in the first time in 1995. And this was about 15 years after I first imagined Japan. Well, my first imagination of Japan was following the American television drama called Shogun, based on the book by James Clavell. And I was fascinated by the depiction of Japan. Japan seemed to be so unique. The samurai society seems to be so special and so different than my own. It was back then, when I was about 10 or 11 years old, that I decided that, just like the hero in the drama, I would like to come to Japan one day. I would like to be a part of the society. I would like to become a samurai, and I would like to marry a Japanese wife. Um, Fast forward 30 years, I can say that I achieved at least two of these dreams. So I arrived to Japan, and my wife is Japanese. So this was my first encounter with Japan. So always I had Japan in mind since childhood. When I was about 22, I decided to go to Japan and start to study. And I went to Japan, and I went to Tokyo, and I studied for 2 years Japanese language and culture. I lived in Tokyo, and I had a great time. And after that, I went back to Israel. I went to study at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, where I studied politics and Japanese studies. I was always interested in politics. And after I finished my BA, I went back to Japan with a Monkasho scholarship to study about Japanese politics and society. And I lived in Kyoto for 6 years, where I did my master's and PhD in Japanese studies. Indeed, if I would ask my parents about what is their image of Japan, their imaginary Japan would be wartime Japan. They used to watch Hollywood movies from the 50s and 60s, the River Kwai and so on. If I would talk with my sisters who are in their 60s, they would say that for them Japan is an economic giant, industrial giant, 12 car manufacturers and so on. But if I would talk with my niece, who likes Japanese anime, for her Japan is an imaginary country, an exciting country with much creativity and cultural creativity. So I think popular culture dramatically changes the image of Japan, and this has a special, I would say, impact, not only on people from far places, but actually from neighboring countries. If you think about places like Korea or Southeast Asia or even China, this completely changes the image of Japan in their eyes. Japan is not only their ex-colonizer, it's not only a economic giant or political giant, which is an ally to the United States, but it's also an exciting country. So in many ways, it diffuses the black or white image of Japan in neighboring country. And I think this has very important political consequences. Well, first, when I went to Japan for my master's, I thought I would do some traditional politics. I studied political science, and I wanted to focus on Japan's politics and foreign relations, especially notions of regionalization and regionalism. But on the way to Japan, I passed through a few cities in Southeast Asia. I went to Singapore and Hong Kong and Seoul. And over there, I saw a major change in Japan's image. Japan, not only an economic giant, but also a popular culture giant. In virtually every city in East and Southeast Asia, you could find massive amount of Japanese popular culture, of anime, of comics, of music. And I saw it happening. It was back then that Japan became a kind of mini Hollywood in East and Southeast Asia. And I was fascinated about it. And I tried to read a lot about it. So I decided to leave traditional politics and focus on Japanese popular culture. And this is the reason, this is what brought me actually to Japan, right? I saw Japan through the eyes of stereotypical eyes of Japanese American producers of Japan during the Edo period. And it made me very much interested in Japan and wanted to study about Japan. This is the same about Japanese popular culture. It creates huge interest in Japan, in its cultures, in its society, in neighboring countries, and also in far places like Israel. So, as any professor of Japanese studies anywhere in the world might testify, these days, anime and manga is what brings students into class and not the economy as it used to in the 80s. So in this sense, I felt that the Japanese popular culture is not only kind of fun thing, or some would call it childish, but it's really a serious thing, and it is one of the biggest advantages that Japan has in the past two or three decades. And using my political science tools, political economist, I try to analyze it, not only from a cultural point of view, but only from an economic and political point of view. Okay, I think there is a difference in the Japanese popular culture dissemination in a neighboring region in East and Southeast Asia versus far region like Europe or the United States, North America, South America. I think the most massive and conspicuous presence of Japanese popular culture has been in the cultural geography of urban East and Southeast Asia, where you can find the biggest variety of products, genres, and where you can actually sense Japanese popular culture much closer than you sense it in other parts of the world. And there are a few reasons for that. First, it's piracy. And unlike conventional wisdom, in my opinion, piracy is one of the best things that happened to Japanese popular culture, especially in Asia, because it created the market actually for Japanese popular culture. I'm talking at the formative years in the 90s and 2000, where it reached consumers in a variety and degree that it couldn't have otherwise. Another reason is that Japan and many societies in East and Southeast Asia has a kind of shared experience of massive economic growth, of urbanization, of evolvement of the culture of consumerism. It's not only consumerism from an economic point of view, but actually from a cultural point of view. Youth culture. So in this sense, you feel much closer in terms of popular culture between Japan and its neighboring countries. And what is interesting that Japanese popular culture is most enthusiastically accepted in these places in spite of the colonial experience. So young people in this region, they might have one idea about their history and about Japanese politics, but when it comes to their popular culture consumption, they prefer to develop their own. Why should history prevent me from liking Japanese anime, as one consumer in Korea told me once? So in this sense, popular culture really helps, bridge or actually create closer links between young people from Japan and from East and Southeast Asia. As a scholar, Nancy Snow once called it, people-to-people relationship. Yes, I think the popular culture market in the European Union and in East and Southeast Asia is very different in the sense that in East and Southeast Asia, it is very much inclusive, and it includes cultural or popular culture confluences coming from different directions. The market is also a kind of evolving and is being recreated. While in Europe and in North America, it's very difficult to change things. Try to market anime in the United States without having to have a relationship with some of the biggest distributors or some of the biggest media companies. The same in Europe. This is very difficult. While in East and Southeast Asia, the market is still, relatively young. You have many small companies, you have medium firms, so it is much easier for new productions to get into the market. And I think this is what makes the difference. And in terms of, but the impact of Japanese popular culture has, of course, many similarities. People around the world, they might not know the name Kishida, the name of the Prime Minister of Japan. They might not have heard about JETRO, Japan's powerful business federation, but they buy millions anime in their millions, and they like manga, and they are aware of Japanese fashion. So this actually makes much more impact than traditional politics. It's been, almost 20 years for the Cool Japan policy. And the big question is, how should the state be involved in this process, or should it be involved at all? And there is no singular answer. There is no perfect model for state intervention. I would say that on the one hand, it is expected that the state cheer and support this process. But on the other hand, it should not become too involved in a way of killing the cool. In terms of Japanese Cool Japan policy, I think that some good things happened. Of course, it supports the infrastructure that is needed for the development of Japan's media industries. It provides mediation between Japanese companies and foreign companies. It supports international conventions like the Anime Festival in Asia, where people get to know about Japanese popular culture, where people from different sides can do business with each other. So in this sense, there is, of course, there is a role for the state. But on the other hand, I think, of course, it shouldn't be too interventionist in the content itself. And speaking with people from the industry, I think one thing that should be perhaps advanced is that to recruit more people from the industry into agencies like the Cool Japan division, and to have more local familiarity with the market. I know this might be very difficult from the point of view of the Japanese public employment system, but actually bringing people from below who actually knows the market better might be beneficial for the long term. Yes, my latest book came out a few years ago, and globalization of anime, and especially the movement of the anime from Japan to the United States during the anime boom years. And in this book, together with Professor Michal Daliot-Bur from the University of Haifa, we interviewed a number of entrepreneurs, both Japanese and Americans, and asked them exactly about this question. We know how anime is being created. We guess that we know how anime is being consumed, but who are the people, the promoters, the agents that brings anime from Japan to the United States? We didn't know much about. So this is why we interviewed these people. And our conclusion that you really need these mediators, people who are both familiar with the cultural content of anime, but even more so, they know more about the American markets. They know what American consumers need and how to market it. So we tried to look at this mechanism of bringing Japanese anime from Japan, and of course disseminating it or marketing it in the United States at the time when there was a greater need for anime. There was a need for new content coming from outside. The American market is always incorporating new ideas, new creativity coming from the outside. So it was a perfect time for anime. But on the long term, we think that anime have impacted the work of American animators. Anime is a part of the toolkit of any American animator these days. So we think that the impact is not only from content or cultural point of view, but a kind of industrial point of view. The anime industry have influenced American animation industry.
Japan up close.